Strange accounts of the Nephilim are often cited in scripture, extra-biblical texts, and historical accounts. Although it is said and accounted through time that the angels came and mated with mankind, strange stories of animal hybrids have trickled down into our culture as myths and legends. The Watchers are depicted as creating mutations and genetically engineering different animal hybrids. The Book of Jasher talks of this. The sons of men in those days took from the cattle of the earth, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the air, and taught the mixture of animals of one species with the other. Many believe the Watchers wanted to create something in their own image, similar to the four-headed living creatures seen in Ezekiel, who had a head of a lion, ox, eagle, and a man. Often, the imagery and context of the Bible makes us conclude that the word is only expressing symbolism. However, deeper study often reveals a deeper substance. The first prophecy in the Bible reveals the foundation of strife between God and Satan that was to occur thousands of years later. In Genesis 3:15, God says, "I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." The first part of this prophecy was fulfilled when David struck the giant Philistine with his sling. The second portion of the prophecy is fulfilled by crucifixion. The word is replete with prophecies and revelations. The first 10 names of the patriarchs of the Bible paint a picture of God's plan. The name meanings, translated into abbreviated form, from Adam to Noah, read, "Man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down, teaching that his death shall bring the despairing rest." According to the book of Enoch, 200 angels came down on Mount Hermon and took on the form of flesh. Semyaza, their leader, made a pact that they were to take on wives. Genesis 6:1-4 says, "The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old men of renown." Mount Hermon means the forbidden place. Interesting enough, this location is the exact parallel opposite of Roswell, New Mexico, on the exact polar opposite of the 33rd degree of the North Latitude. The 33rd degree also bears significance in Freemasonry, as it is the highest level of order that one can obtain in satanic enlightenment. After the descendant of the Watchers, historical and collaborating records indicate that a race of half-breed, angelic human giants inhabited the land, also spreading all sorts of vile practices and corruption. The original offspring, on average, reached heights of 24 to 36 feet. They are talked of as being as tall as cedar trees, which can reach from 50 to 100 feet. Although this may sound exaggerated, archaeological remains substantiate this, from the massive trilithon stones to the Carthaginian uncoverings of 36-foot remains from 200 to 600 BC. The variance between these pre-flood giants could have been that the growth-limiting gene was dormant due to the angelic human mingling process. The growth limiter gene may very well have been determined by age and diet, much like reptiles, who grew for the duration of their life. This could be substantiated by the mention in the Midrash and other sources that they were very voracious, eating as many as 1,000 oxen, horses, and camels each day. In theory, the dormant Nephilim gene could have later been reignited by post-flood carrier hosts. Recent scientific studies have found gene markers which can be shut on and off in transgenerational offspring. These genes can reinitiate themselves in subsequent generations based off of variable changes. This epigenetic gene could be the reason why future generations of Nephilim were passed down dormant. This was the primary reason that God sent the flood, so the lineage of God's chosen people would not be polluted and prevent the Messiah from being born unblemished. This form of genetic warfare was in time of Noah and is believed to perhaps play a role in the future market of beast, implemented in some form of future hybrid genetic or biological mingling of DNA. This importance of genetic preservation can be seen in Noah, who was said to be perfect in his generations, a Hebraic reference to the genetic uncontamination. However, biblical text does not make any mention of any state or perfection of the wives of Noah's sons, which can lead us to speculate on theories of future contamination after the flood. Genesis says that all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth, and that there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. As the holy angelic watchers looked down, a cry went up to heaven for God to intercede. The holy angels pleaded with God to stop the terror. God gave special instructions to his holy archangels. The watchers, who hath joined themselves with the daughters of man, were now fallen angels, and were now unable to shed their flesh and return to heaven. Uriel instructed Noah of the coming judgments. Raphael was to bind Azazel in the desert place of sharp, jagged rocks until the day of judgment. The Lord sent Gabriel to cause confusion and destruction upon the seed of the watchers. And finally, Michael was instructed to bind the leader, Samyaza, and the other evil watchers who joined themselves and brought corruption upon the earth. As the rising waters drew closer, it is said that the giants relied upon their great size and upon the power of their enormous feet to stop the rising floodwaters as they ridiculed Noah. After the flood, the giants rise again as they are seen inhabiting the promised land. However, these descendants are reduced in size and number. The watchers are now imprisoned, and it is likely that the Almighty may have somehow instituted some means of direct angel-human inhibitor, which can now be concluded from Daniel 2:43, which says, "They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay." Speculation suggests that these giants may have descended through Ham with some sort of dormant gene, perhaps awakened through rebellion and evil disposition. The sons of Ham, whom descended giants, were Canaan, Mitzrayim, and Cush. Canaan was inhabited with Anakim. Mitzrayim was the grandfather of the Philistines, and Cush was the father of Nimrod, who is also attributed to being a Nephilim tyrant in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Israelites were led out of Egypt during Moses' time. The king Arad of the Canaanites fought with them and took prisoners among them. But the Lord would eventually destroy and deliver the Canaanites, calling the place Hormah. After this, the Israelites encountered serpents in the wilderness. These were not snakes, but instead, the Hebraic translations mean fury-flying serpents, which were in fact pterosaurs. Many other historians make reference to similar flying serpents, including Aristotle, Cicero, Silanus, and Pliny the Elder. Pliny the Elder talks of how Moses and the Egyptians used different strategies in defense against these predators. There is a region, moreover, in Arabia, situated nearly over against the city of Buto, to which place I came to inquire about the winged serpents. And when I came thither, I saw bones of serpents and spines in quantity so great that it is impossible to make report of the number. The beginning of spring, winged serpents from Arabia fly towards Egypt, and the birds called ibis meet them at the entrance of this country, and do not suffer the serpents to go by, but kill them. On account of this deed, it is that the ibis have come to be greatly honored by the Egyptians, and the Egyptians also agree that it is for the reason that these birds are honored. According to other sources, it appears that these flying dragons would infest the skies of the ancient world if they were not kept in check by the balance of these sacred birds. Moses and the Israelites continue on their journey, encountering the grandsons of Samyaza, Sihon, and Og of Bashan. These giants, fearsome like their ancestors, are eventually defeated, and the Israelites inherit their lands. After Joshua and Caleb wiped out most of the giants, the remnants spread into other lands, integrating into other societies. The island of Malta contains massive temple structures and is known by locals as the last stronghold of the giants of Europe. In the Americas, native tribes tell of the red-haired giants with 6 fingers and double sets of teeth. These corroborating Native American legends also refer to the cannibalistic nature of the giants, confirming biblical narratives in Numbers, which says, "The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature." It appears that wherever these giants occupied, death and destruction soon followed. Roman history accounts for the sacking and burning of Rome. When the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Senoni giants invaded their borders, slaughtering 24,000 warriors and laying siege to the capital hill, the legionnaires were alerted to the Gallic attack by the sacred geese of the night when the 17-foot giants attempted to attack uphill. Marcus Manlius led a band of soldiers defending against these giants, who eventually succumbed to disease and famine. Although these giants continued to raid Italy and surrounding countrysides, the final chapter would not be closed until the command of the legionnaires fell to the great military genius Gaius Marius. He improved and standardized training, weapons, armor, equipment, and command structure, instituting a main tactical unit. Later, Gaius Marius' nephew Julius Caesar would write, "They described the Germans, mentioning their enormous physique, their unbelievable valor and extraordinary military training. The Gauls said that often they had encountered the Germans, they had not been able to endure even the expression on their faces or the glare in their eyes. In ancient Egypt, the first three pharaohs were descended from Rapha, who was also said to have ceded the value of the Rephaim. Like the Nephilimic rulers in other lands, the pharaohs were worshipped as the sons of God, their name meaning son of Ra. Archaeological finds in Egypt also reveal giant cone-headed depictions among normal-sized men, including several pharaohs. Their cone-headed attribute is also seen in the rulership of gods worshipped by the Aztecs and the Mayans. Josephus, an ancient historian, wrote, "And when they had taken it, they slew all the inhabitants. There were still then left a race of giants who had bodies so large and countenance so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown this very day, unlike to any credible relation of other men." The rabbis hold that these giants had 7 names: Amim, because whoever saw one was seized with terror; Rephaim, because their sight made people soft, fearful, like wax; Jibbarim, because their brains alone measured 18 ells; Zamzumim, because they inspired fear and were fierce warriors; Anakim, because they wore huge necklaces in great numbers around their necks; Avim, because they destroyed the world and were destroyed themselves; Nephilim, because they caused the world to fall and fell themselves. Historical records detail the sound of the Nephilim being terrible to the hearing. The Zamzumim could emit strange sounds and often had strange clicking for communication. Other giants were said to produce thundering sounds that could be heard from afar. Those who have examined skeletal remains detail how strange nasal passages can be found in some of these skulls, which may result in the strange sounds that could be produced. The Nephilim were fearsome in battle and were coined berserkers, as they had been seen to go into a raging blood frenzy when in battle. These Celtic giants would also collect the heads of their defeated enemies, bringing them to their king to claim their prize after war. It was also customary for the greatest warriors to challenge their opponents before the battle lines of war. These people were also called the Cimmerians, who are mentioned by Herodotus in Homer's Odyssey as living beyond the Oceanus in a land of fog and darkness at the edge of the world and entrance of Hades. The giants are said to be massively larger in muscle density proportionate to normal human beings. Due to their massive bodies, hearts, and organs, their food and nutritional needs must have been colossal. North American Indians talk of mighty giants that could lift a full-grown buffalo off the ground and throw it over their shoulder and eat many of these in a single day. The Teutones and Cimbri were Germans. These in turn were not just one of the great Celtic family of peoples as opposed to the Scythian one, but the very heart of that family. They were the most Celtic of the Celts. This meant that they were the genuine, wilder, and taller ones. Polybius writes of the Romans and how, once they had gotten used to being struck down by the Gauls, they were incapable of imagining anything worse. Other writers like Plutarch characterizes these giants as having invincible strength and courage. In battle, they attack with the force and speed of 5, and no one can withstand them. It was not until Gaius Marius and his legionnaires restructured their army for battle against these titans. They would exploit the giants for their great size, cutting them down to size as it became known. Marius and the legionnaires approached from the east with the sun and wind at their backs. They fought the fearsome Cimbri and their blood-curdling war bellows. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. It is not by my sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As Goliath moved in for the kill, David reached into his bag and slung one of his stones at Goliath's head. Finding a hole in the armor, the stone sank into the giant's forehead and he fell face down on the ground. David then took Goliath's sword, killed him, and then cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave or forsake you. Deuteronomy 31:6.